Senator Rubio.
Thank you. Mr. Fried, I'm going to talk about this report, the recent study by the Center for Advanced Defense Studies. It's called In China's Shadow. And basically, it's clear from this report that China's allowed a Chinese company and its front company to conduct about $532 million in trade volume. The report identifies 6 companies. You discussed here the sanctions against one. Why did the Treasury only designate one of those 6 companies?
We are actively looking at all possible targets. I won't speak for Treasury and its individual decisions, but in my experience, Treasury is both effective and aggressive in identifying targets and pursuing them. We have to have sufficient evidence to meet Treasury's legal threshold, but I will tell you that we are in the mode of gathering information, and we'll go where the information takes us.
I don't know.
I don't want to get in. I don't.
No, but that just sounds like talk. I mean, I get it. You're saying.
I don't want to talk about a specific company and a specific designation, at least in this session.
Why? They're out there in this report. I mean, they're named. The world, everyone knows who these companies are. There's not a mystery here.
Well, as a general rule, it's best not to talk about current investigations and future.
That's true in a court of law and in an but
in an open session.
No, that's absurd. This is an open reported. This is a report that's out there for the world to see. Everyone knows this. This is not a secret.
I'll tell you what. I will consult with my Treasury colleagues and try to get you whatever we can.
And that's why these hearings often, I mean, are just so hard to sit through sometimes, because you just get all this. And I don't mean to be disrespectful. I know you're towing the company line or whatever, the Secretary of State's line on this stuff, but I think everyone can see what this is. I mean, we are afraid to press the case against too many Chinese companies because of the broader situation between China and the United States. Let me ask you for the record. Has the White House or the State Department ever pressured the Justice Department or Treasury to delay designations and law enforcement actions to avoid embarrassing China?
Not to my knowledge, no, sir.
Okay. Because we have a Department of Justice indictment that was unsealed and civil forfeiture actions. The criminal indictment lists transactions in millions of U.S. dollars going all the way back to 2009, where there's these front companies that served as financial intermediaries for U.S. dollar transactions between North Korean-based entities who were being financed by KKBC, which is a designated North Korean bank, and suppliers in other countries. And it was done in order to evade restrictions on U.S. dollar transactions. And I don't understand, why did we wait from 2009 to 2016? Why did we wait to act against these persons? And the only conclusion one could draw is that beyond the issue of sanctions, we have here the issue of pressure because of the broader situation with China and our foreign policy. And I got to be frank, this just looks to me like an administration that's saying, let's not go too hard on some of these Chinese companies because it's going to destabilize our broader relationship with China on a series of other topics. And that's what it looks like. Here's another point that I don't understand. There are 3 times as many Iran-related persons designated by the United States than North Korea-related persons. Can anyone describe for me the reason for this discrepancy? I have no problem with there being a lot of Iran-related designations, but why are there so many more Iran-related designations than North Korean-related designations, when in fact North Korea has already not only developed weapons, but are demonstrating it and using them in all sorts of tests? Why the discrepancy?
First point to make is that the administration's action on Monday to designate the Chinese banks was an important step. And as I said earlier in the hearings, we are actively looking at a number of targets. With respect to the numbers and comparing Iran and North Korea, the Iranian economy is both much larger and much more connected to the rest of the world than the North Korean economy. And the North Korean economy was, despite huge areas that are hidden behind the various walls of secrecy in Iran, is generally more open. That may have something to do with the numbers. But to answer what I think, Senator, is your larger point, the administration shares Congress's view that the North Korean threat and North Korean actions, including especially the recent nuclear tests compels us to intensify our pressure campaign, working both through the UN with third countries such as the Japanese, South Koreans, Europeans, Australians, Canadians, and using our national authorities in a coordinated fashion to increase the pressure. We welcomed the legislation earlier this year. We've put it to good use, and we intend to pursue North Korean targets aggressively.
All I can say is that what this looks like from watching it is that what we're basically involved in here is a provocation response cycle with North Korea. And you talk about the sanctions from when I know my time is up, and you talk about the bill that Congress passed earlier this year that we passed this year, but it was only until then it was that we finally designated North Korea as a primary money laundering concern. And again, this whole thing looks like, to me, a combination of things. This provocation cycle that we've gotten ourselves into with North Korea, where we're holding back on sanctions to enable to use them if they provoke us in a different setting, and this cycle continues. North Koreans have played this brilliantly over the last few years, buying time for themselves to reach the point they've reached. And the other is, quite frankly, what this looks like is that the United States is it's holding its diplomatic fire and its sanctions fire on some of these issues for fear of impacting our relationship with China. And in our fear of offending the Chinese government or going after some of their entities, who, by the way, are also involved in all sorts of other endeavors that are questionable. So, again, Mr. Chairman, I don't know why it's taken so long and why so little has been done, and it's no surprise we're at the point we're at today.
Just one point, Senator. You mentioned my words, not yours, the trap of the provocation response cycle. That is not where that's not what we're doing. This year especially, working through the UN and other channels, we are in a position of intensifying pressure independent of a provocation response cycle. We are in earnest. We intend to increase pressure on North Korea. To do so, we also have to work around the world with third countries and with the Chinese, as my colleague pointed out. That is our intention. So I agree that a provocation response cycle and staying within such a cycle would not be the right approach, and that is not our approach.
Mr. Chairman, with your permission, if I would just add, Senator Rubio, that if it were the administration's policy to tiptoe around China in dealing with the North Korean threat, we would never have decided with the Republic of Korea to deploy the THAAD system. We would never have designated a Chinese entity and Chinese national. We would never have taken the decision to send a B-1 bomber or aircraft carrier to the Korean Peninsula. It is very much the case that we seek active Chinese cooperation. We recognize that a change in China's behavior is a prerequisite to getting a change in North Korea's behavior, and the President, the Secretary of State, and others have made crystal clear, directly in private to Chinese leaders and in public, that we think there is much more that China needs to do and can do and should do to tighten the screws on the DPRK, given their significant leverage and their special relationship.
And all those moves are important, but we're talking about sanctions here. And yes, we sanctioned one company. There are multiple companies affiliated from China-related companies who we have just as much evidence against. Everybody knows. I mean, everyone knows who they are. And when you look at how long it's taken to get to this point, and you look at the limitations that have been placed where only one company's been designated so far, when there are multiple companies of equal status, and some actually are involved in even more of these sorts of deals, it starts to look like we're trying to not do too much too soon. And this notion of a standard of proof, I understand about that if you're going to prosecute someone in federal court, but from this perspective, is a very different situation. This is not even a secret. The world knows who these companies are, and quite frankly, they don't necessarily take great steps to try to hide it in many occasions, because the interest of the Chinese government ultimately, beyond anything else, is stability in North Korea. They don't want to see a regime collapse and millions of people pouring over the border, and in addition to a profit motive that's involved here as well for some of these companies. We know who these companies are. We haven't moved fast enough on it. There's no reason not to move faster. There's plenty of targets of opportunity and plenty of information out there about them.
And thank you, Senator Rubio. And I just remind Secretary Russell and the administration that under the Sanctions Act that we passed, these are mandatory investigations required and mandatory sanctions required unless the administration provides a waiver to Congress. And at this point, do you intend to provide us with waivers of companies that you're investigating?
No.
And so why have we only designated one company then?
As I said earlier, the Treasury Department, the State Department, and our intelligence community are all involved, engaged in investigations. As Assistant Secretary Russell said, of course, the preferred option is for China itself to do more, as we think it should. A second option is to have Chinese companies independently come to the conclusion that it would be a lot better for them if they avoided interaction with North Korean companies. But clearly, our actions on Monday indicate that we are willing to sanction Chinese companies who are evading UN or U.S. sanctions. So we are pursuing all of these avenues.
Senator Markey.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. We know that Kim Jong-un's goal is to die